Welcome to another episode of Just My Baby Daddy podcast. It's your favorite baby daddy, AJ, and today we're going to talk about a subject that kind of hits close to home for me. I didn't experience with my father or my grandfather, but I have experienced it when it came to my grandmother, and that is the topic of dementia. We look at, especially when it comes to like our dads, they're usually the strongest people that we know growing up. They're the center of influence, the center of strength. And then when you get to a stage in life where that's not necessarily the case anymore, and you start to notice that the man you once viewed as the superhero is really human, and you can start to see human things start to happen to him. And for that conversation, I would like to bring in my man, Mr. Doug Honig, to have this conversation. How you doing today, Doug?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Good. I appreciate you taking the time to open up. But before we get into like what your dad is now and the effects that dementia has played, what was it like growing up with your father previous to this?
We had the most wonderful relationship. He had a great sense of humor. He liked to play a lot of sports with me growing up. I grew up in New Jersey, so we were close to the beach. We went to the ball fields. We went to the New York Giants football games together, and his presence and his guidance was always so comforting. I mean, there was never any issues between us. He was a wonderful dad. He was the sole provider for our family, and he was the guy that took care of there was just never a question that it wasn't going to be handled, you know?
Yeah. So when did you start to notice that a shift, that something may not be the dad that I've always known?
So he's 87 now, and with his dementia, he's gone. It's the worst. When he was 78, that he was coming home from Florida back up to New Jersey, and he was driving alone, and he fell asleep at the wheel on Ive and veered across all the lanes of traffic and totaled his car. And so he was lucky to live. We were lucky that nobody else was involved. And I had this moment of, oh my God, if that was the end for him, nobody in our family knew how to do anything. I mean, I'm a grown man at this point, with my own kids, but my mom didn't know how to pay the bills. I didn't know where any of the information was. And so that really began my deep dive into his life to figure out what happened and what should we do to prepare, from that moment going forward.
So how was that though? Because for a couple of things, one, an accident that's got to be traumatizing, especially at any point. Recovery from an accident is not something easy. And then you have your father at the stage that he was at that point. He wasn't a young individual, right? So how
Right.
was that emotionally just initially dealing with that part?
It was terrifying because I got a call that, he wrecked the car. He's okay, but you still have this moment of panic and your heart skips a beat and, you just feel all those feelings. So it was in the spring when that happened because they were done with spending the winter in Florida. So the next time I brought my family to New Jersey, which was only a couple of weeks later, I think, I said, listen, to my mom and dad, we need to have a meeting and we're going to sit at the dining room table and I want to have a talk about what's going on. So I didn't prepare to be the guy to lead this whole thing in my family. It was kind of thrust upon me. And the more we started to take apart, what was going on, the more we learned and the more that was revealed about how dad's condition was really beginning to slip into dementia. And then in talking to the people that he worked with, they're dear friends of his for many years, they started to tell us, we've been noticing this or that, and he's just not the same. So that summer was the summer of a huge amount of change. And it really became this burden that I felt that he's really, we all know what dementia is going to do to people. It's horrible. So I felt like I've got to seize this moment before it's too late to get a handle on, the situation that he was previously managing.
And so when you felt like you were thrust into that role, how accepting, because and this is one thing that I really want to see because I know a male ego, right? And it's giving up the power and authority that you've had your entire life over your entire life, just handing that over to someone else doesn't seem like something that I would be so willing to do, right? How
Yeah.
was that when you realized that I need to start stepping in and taking over? How was your dad receptive to that?
I love this question, and I have 2 parts to the answer, okay? We had that meeting at the dining room table, and my dad was very open, and so was my mom. They both came prepared with the list of the accounts and the banks, and, my dad slid across the table a list of his passwords, which really opened up the the relationship between us, that here's trust, right? Here, I'm giving you these passwords. So he recognized the value in me capturing in a, what was I using at the time, was a Google Doc of all of the things that he managed. So that's part one of the answer. He was open and he was prepared and willing and really welcomed that conversation. Part two is a very different part of the answer. On a different visit with him, we had to go run an errand, and so he happened to be the one driving, and we just went to Home Depot or Target or somewhere. It was a terrifying drive, and I realized things are really moving fast, bad, and he was trying to make left turns in oncoming traffic. Like it was. I was really afraid for our safety. So we get to the parking lot and I said, "Whoa, Dad, it was very scary. Are you okay?" I didn't really know exactly what was happening. And then I said, I can't let you drive home. And he was dead against that. He didn't want to give me the keys. So
Yeah.
we had like a showdown in the parking lot. And I said, "Listen, I was very afraid coming here. I'm trying to be rational and calm and convince him that I don't know what's happening, but I'm not comfortable with you driving. So if you don't give me the keys, I'll, call my sister if she'll come get, it was like I'm making a line in the sand here." So that was a really difficult moment. He relented. He did give me the keys. So when we drove home, we had another family meeting, but this had an entirely different set of urgency, and he was mad. But I have to tell you, it was the right decision, and it was hard.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was
'Cause
hard.
I can just imagine because, if you're in a position where everyone else around you may see, you're falling apart some, but if you still feel like you got it, it's kind of hard to just give that up, you know?
Yeah, you're right, because with dementia, you're with us and you're not with us. Your mind drifts away, but sometimes you're present. And the moments he was present, which were still plentiful at that time, he was angry for a long time. However, I was adamant, and so was my mom and my sister, and we just said, you can't, because it's we just can't risk you getting hurt or, God forbid, somebody else.
And so what I have seen happen is a lot of time it becomes like some of an attitude shift. In different times, it's sometimes you're extremely happy and there's that person that you know, and then there's that other time where it's anger, right? They recognize and realize that they're not the person that they used to be, and they're still trying to be that person. So when those moments of anger or things like that happen, how do you deal with that? Recognizing like, hey, I know this isn't the person that I know and love that I've always known, but this is just what's going on in the moment.
This is the worst part for me. The anger that I have against dementia is every day of my life, because my dad doesn't talk anymore. He's in a wheelchair and he's alive, but he's not. And I sit with him and I hold his hand and I try to talk about things that are from our past, and he's just not capable. And so I'm really upset every time we're together, and I'm really angry because he was robbed, first of all, of all these years of his life. And then I feel like, if I'm being selfish and I'm being honest, I was robbed of these years with him. We had such great times together, and I miss him desperately, even when I'm sitting with him.
Yeah. So how is that when you're sitting there? Because I know it was for me, right? When I had to sit with my grandmother, and my grandmother actually passed away at my mother's house.
I'm sorry for your loss.
But I remember like the last couple times, like grandma wasn't there, but I was okay because whenever I would see her, all I would think about is the old times, right? And I would know this isn't who's sitting here isn't the person I know. And I'm okay
Right.
with that. But how do you cope with that? Because it's a totally different you physically see and it physically they don't even look the same. You start to see them start to wilt away, you start to see little things just start to go.
Yeah.
And just sitting there in that moment, you don't want to avoid them. You want to be there and love them, but you know it's not really them.
It's
Dealing
such
with
a
that
mix of
part is
emotions.
hard.
It's it's such a mix of emotions because I love my dad, I always will, but sometimes I hate sitting with him because he's not him anymore, and I can't talk with him. I mean, there's drool, I've gotta clean his shirt, there's stuff that you gotta deal with that's real to keep him clean and safe, even in his house. So it's a real mix of emotions. I mean, like I said, I miss him. I'm so angry about the situation. I'm really sad because, in my life, there's so many things that I would have normally wanted to share with him about my work, my own kids, my wife, or whatever we're doing, and I can't. And then I feel, awful just the same for my mom she's 85. She's stressed beyond, her capacity in managing his care. So, it's a huge burden to try to help her, ease her day to day. There's such a mix of emotions in every single visit. One of the things I really try to do is just to get her to laugh because she's got very little joy left in her life. So we've got this little tradition that I started when she and I are out running errands. We go to Shake Shack. I buy her a milkshake just so we could sit and giggle because she doesn't have that anymore.
Yeah. And that because selfishly you just think about the weight that it puts on you and the other person, but it affects everyone in the family.
Yeah.
So
Oh, for sure.
so with that in the family, you also have children.
Yes.
And so your children see granddad in one way, but now, I mean, they're older now as well. So they know granddad is different. How have you seen their trends and how have you talked through them? Because if I, based off of what you're telling me, they were more or less teenagers when it really started to kick in. So I guess
Yeah.
they can comprehend a little more than if they were younger. But how did that go? Because I have someone that a cousin that had the conversation with their children about their grandmother, and they don't comprehend it quite the same. But yours were older, so how did they take it?
Yeah. My daughter's 24 and my son's 21. So they're fully aware of what's going on. It's been, 8 or 10 years, so they were quite younger at the time, and in the beginning, I felt like my mom was trying to hide my dad's condition. I don't know if she was embarrassed or afraid that other people would find out, and I kept saying, "Mom, everybody knows. It's not a secret and it's not a big deal. Lots of people have dementia. It's terrible, but this is it." So, I decided I could only have one story, meaning I can't manage what you know and what you know and what you know all differently. I'm just telling everybody the same thing, including my kids. So I was very open with them, and every time we visited, they saw the changes, and they love him very much because when they were little, he was wonderful, and now he's very different. So it weighs on them in different ways. Just by geography, my son happens to see him more than my daughter these days, and he has tremendous patience for him. My daughter weighs more emotionally on her. So they're dealing with it in their own ways. He's really good about it. I'm not saying she's not. It's just, she carries
Yeah, I mean, it's
more
just
more
different.
tears, let me say.
Yeah, it's just more. She shows it more emotionally.
Yeah.
So one thing that I think about, especially after seeing it and going through it, and it wasn't my direct parent, is what happens now when I get older, and like what type of conversations would I have with my children as they get older, in case anything like this were to happen to me. Is that something that, since this has happened to your father, that's something that you thought about at all?
Yeah, in fact, it's been a big change in my life. So that Google Doc I mentioned earlier, when I collected all their information, that was really for me and my mom to understand, how do we pay the bills? How do we log into the bank? How do we do this or that or the mortgage or the car? Who do we call when the hot water tank needs something? All those things I put into a master document really for me, and then over time it evolved into something more formal, and now it's become something that I call the particulars. My mom named it, the particular details. And then my wife and I made a copy of our own information, so we haven't shared it really with our kids. I'm only 56, so it's not as critical maybe,
Yeah,
but they know that I have this and it'll be ready for them when the time comes. At the same time, in talking with my friends, "Hey, how's your mom doing?" Just the conversation you and I are having. And I said, I made this list of questions. You might find it helpful. And I shared it with them and they said, "Where'd you get this? This is unbelievable." And I said, "I made it." And it's really been helpful because it covers finances and banking and insurance and mortgages and end of life wishes. I just kept evolving with it. And so I was happy to share it with my friends. And then some people said to me, you might turn it into a book and try to sell it. So that's part of my online presence on Threads. This workbook called The Particulars is on Gumroad. If anybody was interested in taking a look at it, it's 12 worksheets that covers a whole bunch of these topics, and it's written in a way that walks you through it very calmly. Because if you were doing this in an emergency, if your mom or dad had a, God forbid, a heart attack, and you're trying to collect all this in the emergency room, you can't. And so what I tell people is, this is not a weekend project. Have one conversation every couple of weeks. Just ease into it. And that's what I did with my parents. They were open about it, and they were grateful that I made this document for our family. And that's really where it started.
Yeah, you know what? That's really really good because I'm gonna get a copy of it as well, and I would do one for myself, even though I'm 42. I wouldn't mind doing that because it's something that can, God forbid, I don't have to be old for something to happen.
That's the scariest part, right?
Yeah, you don't have to be old for, and it doesn't have to be. It could be anything. I
Yeah.
can go outside. I don't even want to speak on what could happen, but
No, don't.
yeah, yeah, but yeah, that is a really, really, really great idea, and I'm gonna make sure that when I share the episode, I'm sharing a link to everything there as well. So I do have a question. You said there's so much stuff that's gone on that you wish you could talk to your dad about.
Yeah.
If there's one question you can ask your dad that you may not have asked him in the past, that you
Yeah.
wish just go and ask him now.
So he was a CPA, a certified public accountant for his career,
Okay.
and he worked for big firms. And then when I was in high school, he broke away and started his own practice. So I would ask him, you've got me nearing the end of high school, about to go to college, and my sister behind me. How did you find the strength to be so brave at that time in your life where you had the cars and the mortgage and the college bills coming, to go out on your own? That seems, I work for a big company, which is, it's got pluses and minuses, but to quit your job and go out on your own, he did very well after that. But my God, I would love to talk about how he was so brave to do that.
Yeah, that's actually good because to step out there when you know you got a family and everything to support, it's a bold move. That is a very, very, very bold move.
Yeah.
So I do want to leave you with one question. I always ask, what would you want your legacy to be as a father? Ask you in a different way. What did you think your father's legacy will be? And what do you want your legacy to be? So it's two parts. What is your father's legacy? While he's still here, if you
Yeah.
could tell him anything, Dad, what you left me was this, and what would you want your legacy to be for your children to say to you?
Yeah. I would tell him that he was a great provider. And like I said, he was the guy that took care of everything. There was just never a question. He was never afraid to get his hands dirty in terms of, like actually getting them dirty to fix something, or, getting into the paperwork, and, it's going to be a headache with the insurance or whatever the thing is. He just ate it. He did it and he never complained. And I always thought, there's just never a question that he's not getting it done. And I really admired that. And so I hope that I've shown my kids by if not the same, similar behavior. You've got to do the work. You've got to be a responsible stand up person, and you're accountable to yourself, but you're accountable to others just the same. And hopefully they've seen that as my wife and I have raised them.
You can't ask for anything better than that. So what I will say before we go, I want you to give a shout out to your page one more time.
Yeah, it's Gumroad, GUMROAD.com is the site. And then you search for The Particulars and you'll find my workbook.
The particulars. I am definitely going to get that workbook, and I know
Yes.
a lot of people that can benefit from that as well. I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much. This was wonderful.
Episode of Just My Baby Daddy podcast. I know you liked what you saw. So what I need for you to do is go back and look at past episodes. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share our YouTube page, Just My Baby Daddy Podcast. And you can follow us on all social media at Just My Baby Daddy Pod.